I'm like the degen that's broke sometimes. I just go in and
It's a
window
bad
shop,
combo.
window shop like everything.
We are back with another episode of the Kickblocks podcast. My name's Nick.
And I'm Dro.
And we got a very special guest in the building. We got Pat from Thirdweb, head of growth. Pat, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, welcome, Pat.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm truly honored to be here. I know, Nick, you and I have been chatting for a minute, but Alessandro, it's a pleasure. I've been listening to the most recent episodes, and I'm stoked to be here.
Nice, man.
Awesome.
Well, I just met Pat, like 5 minutes ago. He seems like a pretty chill guy, so I'm excited to get to know you, Pat.
Yeah, for sure. Pat, are you centered in New York, right? I think I met you in New York for NFT NYC, but I know everyone comes in from all around the world. So
ironically enough, that meeting in Bryant Park where we got told off by the park attendant that we needed a permit, but based in Williamsburg, we just moved into a new office actually at the Brass Factory, which is like
amazing.
looking across at the guys at Xerox Park. There's the team at Psychedelics here, Ditto PR. There's digital.xyz, which is like a venture fund for the space. There's a bunch of people kicking. Alice and like the team that works out here has the whole place just, you can't see them, but raked with plants. It's
amazing.
A botanist dream. And it's truly good vibes, man. Right here, like in the heart of Williamsburg, you just walk out, have all the food in front of you. Yeah, I think like one thing Caddy who runs like growth and marketing with me out of New York very much identified that like lighting and just the surrounding atmosphere of like, when you're leaving your office space, you want to get uplifted, you want to feel energized, and it's got to be a little bit of, a change of scenery, if you will, so we can walk 5 minutes to Domino Park and just like look at the skyline, reset, do your one-on-ones in that environment. It's like a dream.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love that. That's really great. I mean, it seems like you guys have a really, like dynamic growth team. It's doing a lot of cool stuff, like that event you mentioned in Bryant Park. I would love to find out a little bit more about sort of how did you get into crypto? How did you get involved in the first place? What was that sort of spark for you?
Yeah, so I probably around 2016, 2015, I think Bitcoin really started to like, come into presence. Probably similar to you guys, you find yourselves on forums or, like sub pages of the internet, if you will, reading about Bitcoin and the various kind of, networks that were cropping up early. And nothing was that pull, right? I remember being in these places, but never really spending more than a whim. And then I was working at a brand called Super Plastic. Okay. From pre-pandemic into like the height of the pandemic, based up in Burlington, Vermont. They're primarily a collectibles brand. Actually, there's a couple over here, and they're launching their NYC store on Thursday, which is like, it's just a timely, kind of.
Yeah.
But spent like two and a half years there, and we were exploring, what is the next. The whole premise of Super Plastic is essentially create IP. And then monetize that IP in a variety of different formats. But the point being is the IP is rooted in like this digital kind of medium, right? So they're influencers that house their narratives on Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and things of that nature. There's Brood out of LA actually. Travis who founded FWB, if you guys are familiar, also has another project called Brood. They have an influencer called Lil Michaela. Same kind of premise, right?
Lil Michaela, yeah. I've seen that
you're creating IP, and then you're monetizing that through fandom and the various kind of merchandising of that fandom. And point being is like the next extension of that was obviously digital collectibles and NFTs, and this is I think end of 2020. This is like the moment where I was on a call with a partner, and we were effectively like exploring an activation idea. They mentioned Web3, and I was like,
"What? Perked up.
Like, is it a brand? Is it a website? Yeah. How do I, as we're digging into it further, I'm like, how do I access this Web3? Do I need a different device? Like, what is the deal? Do I need a different browser? And obviously, ultimately, you find out it's really just like the wallet is that initial kind of utilitarian piece that you need to access it. But from there, spent like 3 to 4 months doing some research, putting together like essentially an entire presentation for us internally, and then we activated, right? We went to market. there were a lot of people internally that really led our strategy, and a lot of us didn't know what we were doing. Like, to be honest, we were kind of testing the waters. We had a couple of drops on Nifty Gateway, cool partnership with Mac on Deck, that then led into like an opportunity with Christie's, like the famed auction house. Did an entire, in retrospect, I haven't had a chance to actually enjoy this.
Yeah.
Animated, we blew up Christie's in this piece of animated content. And like the whole narrative around the drop was effectively like, there's I think it was 20 different one of ones, and Janky and Gugimon, who are the two main characters at Super Plastic, roll into this vault and blow up Christie's, creating, I think, it was just under 10,000 variations of these 20 one of ones. So there's a really, really well told storyline, and Ioana and Galen and Paul over at Super Plastic like really thought through that piece, like the branding and the narrative, super important. But I think we were still early in terms of like the drops and the technology. And kind of, I think you saw this with a lot of projects, 2020, 2021, that promised X, Y, and Z in their roadmap and then, struggled to execute. And even still to this day, how many different projects were like, we're going to create a game. We're going to create a blockchain game.
It's so
and
tough to create a game, honestly. Like, people who, like, I don't know, so many layers, so many things you have to be testing, so many different teams, so much infrastructure, so much funding behind that. So, like, I don't even blame them too much. I think a lot of them probably thought they were about to build a game and then, like, got into it and they're like, wait, hold up.
Yeah, well, I think it's a matter of people just kind of trying to think of different spheres. Right? Everybody knows, like, gaming, huge, multi-billion-dollar. How do we make that Web3? And then they go and it's like, oh shit, it takes like 5 years, like 4 years to make like a AAA type of game, and then it might suck. Like, it might not even be a good game, like, know? So, I feel like that, like, people have taken little industries like that. One of the things I want to ask you with collectibles, right? It's I think one of the reasons everybody knows right now we're like in a bear market, and there's that distinction between people who actually like collectibles and people who are traders or just looking to earn money. Chasing a fad, or just think they're investing in something, right? Which they totally could be, but really at the heart of it, I think for some of these things to be successful, you have to like the product that you're buying, you know what I'm talking about? And so I feel like right now we strayed away from that, and I'd like to ask you, what do you think about how do you get people to kind of like what you're doing and not think, oh, you're just money grabbing something using Web3?
It's a great question. And I think like all of those points are incredibly valid, especially at a time like now, right? Where we're feeling in this space, a lot of people are feeling the pain, more than we typically would. And it gives us an opportunity to, in retrospect, look at like, oh, maybe we went wrong there a little bit. I think sustainability and like always building something for the long term. So if you're on the outside assessing something, it's like, okay, is this scalable? Like what happens beyond the drop? I think that was something I've been joking about with Caddy. It's like Beyond the Mint is like great podcast name. Maybe it already exists, but if not, then I'm going to coin it. But it's still, to that point, it's like, it's not a one and done, especially now and for the long term. It's like you're building, like that first NFT drop really should be like your first footprint into Web3, if you will, and it should lead into whatever happens next and whatever your ultimate goals are. And if, I guess to that, to extend that, if your ultimate goal is to make money, then like understand it's going to take a long time, and there's a lot more that goes into it than just a cash grab that like we saw in 2021 and early 2022. And that happens with markets that drive a lot of interest and a ton of volume, and kind of that the PR cycle that really like creates a ton of awareness, and then a lot of people are seeing that PR cycle tied with large dollar amounts, in a time when inflation is very, very real. It's only going to create kind of the cascading effects that we've seen on both a retail and a commercial scale. Anyways, to your point, right, like you should be looking at projects that have a strong narrative, a strong brand tied in with IP that you personally like, or the founders, the artists, the backers, the creators themselves.
Yeah.
You should always be looking at it with like a little bit of a deeper, tie-in, unless you have cash blood. If you have cash blood, by all means, like, do whatever tickles your fancy.
Yeah,
But
dry powder.
I'm like the degen that's broke sometimes. I just go in and
It's a
window
bad
shop,
combo.
window shop like everything. No,
Yeah.
Nick knows that I got in and like I don't go crazy or anything like that, but
Mhm.
I do live in the degen Twitter sphere and listen to and like know a lot of the main characters and it's interesting. It's fun almost like just to keep up with it.
Dude,
Even though I
it's
don't really
entertainment.
participate in it,
It
but
truly is like
the
its
the
own form of
biggest thing
entertainment.
is like to me one of the funniest things sometimes is that projects that come out, speculation is more valuable than actually delivering. Like a
Mm.
project that people are speculating on that like, oh, in like 6 months you're gonna have like this, we're gonna have this great, our roadmap or whatever, or it
Yeah.
says 6 months down the line we're gonna have something. Those projects tend to balloon a little bit, and then the projects that are building, the projects that are sorry delivering things like, hey, we just released this, and hey, now we're adding this to our project. That balloon pops. Right now, people kind of see it's like, oh, this is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And they're no longer kind of like paying up in terms of what they speculate the value of that project to be. They're just looking at it like, okay, like this is what you gave us, and now that value kind of balloons. And that's one of the things that the degens, and they know they're degens, right? They
Mhm.
know that they're just trying to cash grab and all these things. It's interesting. I like their take because even though I don't participate that way, like Nick and I really like to buy things we actually believe in, buy
Mhm.
things that we, with teams that we actually like, projects that we think are going somewhere. But for me, it's fun to know, like, okay, well, what are the degen speculators thinking right now? And what they're thinking right now is, well, you know what, a project that isn't really delivering anything and promising everything in the world
Mhm.
is their cash grab, like, stuff. And that's dangerous, I think, for the space. But
Yeah. It-
um making sure people are aware of that, right? I like to report in the degen sphere so anybody can come in and be like, okay, like I should probably stay away from teams like that because that's what they're all talking about.
Yeah, I think there's also an element of expectations management. Like Rome wasn't built in a day. Like if you think about NFTs, I think there's going to be an extension of the capabilities and what they're used for in the future, the technology. But right now, it's sort of half luxury signaling and half storytelling,
Yeah.
right? Or like a community build. And if you think of like the biggest luxury brands, like Louis Vuitton wasn't like a 6 month roadmap. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
Superman, Marvel isn't a 6 month roadmap. Those things take decades. They take
I mean,
generations
Gucci,
to.
right?
Yeah,
They
Gucci.
just
Like,
celebrated 100 years.
yeah, exactly. Like, so, like, it's actually interesting thinking about what are the newest, fastest growing luxury brands. Maybe like Telfar
Yeah.
or Telfair. That's like a big luxury thing that just popped up. Or like maybe something that's big in the consciousness, like Jordan Peele. Maybe it might be somebody that might be an expert in making sort of
Yeah.
like culturally significant stories that have just like that very quickly came into like the zeitgeist and made a big impact. But for the majority of things, you don't really have sort of a huge cultural force behind those things. Coming from like the perspective of sort of from super plastic and coming from that side of things, what do you think about Pat? Like the longevity needed to generate sort of that groundswell behind some of these things.
I think that's a fantastic question. And like good call outs around Telfair and like Jordan Peele as well. I have yet to see Dope, but
I just saw it the other day. I was like, "Whoa, what's going on?"
Yeah.
It's pretty good. I don't know if it's like good yet, but it was interesting. It was
yeah,
cool.
engaging, right?
Yeah, engaging. That's
which
it.
seems to be like the goal of entertainment.
it gets
these
the, it gets the
days.
people going.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. I would almost say that you referenced it in like the state of NFTs currently is
Yeah.
X.
Yeah.
We all know that it eventually will get to Y, and we're kind of in that intermediary stage where people are, I mean, that's the blessing of a down market, a bear market, is that it's a great time to build because there's so much less chatter. Like devs and teams can just focus on what needs to be built. And I think we're going to start seeing interesting things around dynamic NFTs probably towards the end of this year.
Yeah.
And you already see it with like token gating and memberships
Yeah.
and things of that nature. It's like that was always going to be. I think I started like bothering people about this back in March, like at Ethember, South by Southwest, February and March.
Yeah.
In talking about like we're at the PFP max. Like, we
Yeah.
cannot deal with any more PFP collections. Like,
Yeah.
it's just too much. And most of those projects are going to go to zero, sadly. And we're here now, but it was always going to be membership, that like almost intangible utility that is tied to the token itself. Whether that is access to an IRL event, access to some kind of experience in a digital hybrid format. It could be, one and done, kind of like, think about like a So Far Sounds, but done in like a virtual setting. Things of that nature. I think there's so much extensibility and so many more creative people than myself who can, take that and iterate on top of it. And then dynamic NFTs will only, like Thirdweb, we released so much stuff in the last month, but one of the things I'm so proud of is multi-wrap, which is like, we've got a couple of people already like activating and kind of beta testing in that. You can wrap ERC 721s, 1155s, ERC 20s. You can wrap a not NFT inside, like if you wanted a redemption code, and so it's that kind of level of composability that I think is going to be really important to see, And I'm sorry, because I kind of transgressed or digressed away from your original question around luxury, but like that's that next piece is like utility, and our utilities become this buzzword that is like the second half of a roadmap once a drop has happened. But I think we'll start to realize that it's so much
be built
more
right into the NFT. Yeah,
it's much more intangible than that.
I feel like utility is the word people are using right now because they got bored of using innovative for like so many decades at this point. Because I hear everything you're saying, Pat, and everything you're saying, Nick, and I keep thinking, at its core, innovation drives all of this, right? And technology in general. And what are we talking about? We're just talking about, a brand new technology in our era. I know we don't have the answer to this now, but what that next major, shifting, groundbreaking technology is that innovates this space, I think that's what everybody who believes in this technology really believes is going to happen, right? And we're all here kind of, some of us are building it. Web3 is, deploying the tools for people to build it and building it themselves, and there's other great companies that are doing the same. And when we talk about projects, it's really interesting that we have like these two groups of ecosystem, where it's like the participators and the builders, right? And both need to be innovative in their own ways, right? I think they kind of play off of each other, right? Because the builders, me and Nick would do this all the time. I'll call Nick up like at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock, and I'll just be like, what do you think about, and we'll just go through like this list of ideas, and like an hour in the ideas completely changed. But like, that's one side of it, right? And then the other side would be somebody who goes in and they go, well, why can't I do this? That question itself, why can't I do this, could be the like light bulb moment that an engineer developer goes, oh shit, they're right. And I like hearing both sides, because I recently started like developing and all that stuff, and I've gotten into that world, and that's why I bug Nick all the time. I'm like, Nick, there's so much shit out here to build, bro. And but all that to say, and to kind of shift, let's shift focus here onto innovation in this technology, right? Blockchain technology itself was innovative, and that's kind of been what has set the foundation for all of this. What's your hot take? What's your cold take? What's your conviction in terms of, what's your guess for what the innovative play is? Nick and I have spoken on this topic before, because really there is no right or wrong answer. Nobody really knows yet, right? But when you go, no, I know, damn it, I know that one, like, that's got to be it. We have a few. One, like, just to remind people here, one of the ones that I saw was like, somebody got in a car and sent received an NFT from their friend and was able to start the car because they got remote access to turn on that car.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, Nick, that's it. That's fucking it. That's like, that is the $1 billion idea. I'm like, it's probably not, but like, I feel like everybody kind of has one of those. Like, what's yours, Pat?
I mean, dude, this is To be honest, I think Knyck and I actually talked about this when we were in Bryant
Yeah,
Park, but it's whoever's going to take this idea of bringing stems, and I think Xerox Stems is trying to do this ultimately. There's probably a couple that are like at this point of like creating a mental model that makes sense, but stems that are composable and on chain, so that I can take a beat that Knyck has produced and maybe, you know, a vocal, Alessandro, that you've sung and recorded. I can sample your vocal, take the beat, and like put that in a new edit, remix, whatever you want to call it. And you both end up being credited for the royalties over time because it's programmed into the smart contract. You know, and you're able to effectively fork that smart contract, or you know, and so you're essentially correcting all that is wrong in music royalties and kind of revenue. There's a whole marketplace and platform that needs to go along with that, and obviously the adoption of the artists themselves. But that's my $1 million idea. Outside of that, ZK rollups obviously have been the hot take of the moment, like Polygon. Hermes team, like rolling that out last week. Kudos to them. And then you obviously have like all of the other, you know, Script, I think is kind of in that same space. Then you have like Immutable X already, like very much kind of same framework, and probably a couple others that I'm failing to mention. But ZK rollups are interesting, and I think just extensively, dude, it's going to be a multi-chain future because the chains themselves are going to have different use cases specific to the needs of their end users, whether they be orgs, you know, consumers, whatever it might be. I'm curious to see what this merge. You know, we're edging ever closer.
Yes,
like there's a date on the calendar. Wild.
I don't want to believe it. I trust issues.
I know.
Trust issues.
I know. Loose. It's very much like a loose date, but we'll see. We'll see. That's those are my 3 hot takes, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
I like the I like that you mentioned before that it's not like a bear market, it's the build market, and it's time for people to, you know, start coming together, and that like all the like the nonsense and all like the sort of like the speculation sort of gets cleared out during these time periods, and it's really only the people that really believe, only really want to build, and it's less sort of people poking holes and more people just innovating, right? Like I think a lot of people say that DeFi Summer was just like 4 different orgs. It was, you know, Uniswap and a couple other people that like made really like long-lasting products and spurred that innovation. And I think it's going to be something similar that you know, kicks off the next wave.
Who you said 4, right? So it'd be Uniswap. Would it be like Rari?
Yeah, I think I forget. I've heard like the 4 called out before. I forget the other.
Like,
I know
in
that.
In
that sort of
clicks.
yeah, and everybody's sort of like, okay, cool, yeah, we have these like this, so the composability was there.
Well, dude, the other thing that's really interesting in that there's a couple of good books about this. How things work, or maybe it's how
innovation is made, like how people
or
come
it's
together,
like,
and then things people come up
and
with.
it's talking about ecosystems, and like cities
100%.
themselves have much faster innovation cycles because they have a much broader network of people with ideas generally. And so I think there's something to be said around both Web3 technology in general, that like all of us that have kind of ended up in this sphere tend to be trying to push the boundaries at a much higher rate than anyone else, even in the technology industry. And then couple that with a bear market where it's interesting meme idea, bears coming out of hibernation, hard hat on, perfect time for builders. But there's probably something to be said about less of the noise, less of the skepticism, none of this external influence poking holes or distracting us from, you know, our end goals. And so those innovation cycles within those respective microcosms of like, you know, whether it's DeFi, whether it's NFTs, whether it's, you know, metaverse stuff, you know, happens much, much quicker because we're all tinkering towards the same goal, or tinkering towards, you know, pushing those boundaries faster. I'd be curious. Yeah, eventually Web3 will be established enough that we'll have, you know, economists and other academics looking at the industry itself and starting to study these kind of trends. But I would imagine that would be kind of a, you know, a takeaway in the future.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, that's awesome, and I think that it's great that your team and then the org is like sort of so focused on enabling developers and making it easy. Could you tell me a little bit about sort of the mission, how you found the org and how you decided like, okay, cool, this is the place that I want to be. This is where I can make the biggest impact.
Yeah, I was blessed to be recruited out of Superplastic, and it was at a time when I was kind of looking for, you know, a new opportunity. So it was a serendipitous kind of connection. Talking with the founding team, like Caddy, they're the founding engineers, and the two co-founders, Steven and Furkan, really like
just click.
Yeah, I was like, let me join this rocket ship, because those two and like the team they built around them is incredible, to say the least, and I'm honored to be a part of that. At its core, right? Like it all started. So they started hacking away at this like back in early 2020, and it was originally something called Access Packs. It was kind of an idea around loot boxes similar to like NBA Top Shot, but a little bit more composable. After a number of conversations with potential customers and current customers, like the idea and the opportunity was so much greater than that. And so started ideating around that, expanding, the product. And, now it's from a premise and kind of mission perspective, we're open source software for Web3 developers, Web2 developers, anyone trying to build within the space, making that framework more streamlined, secure, and permissionless, serverless, decentralized. Sticking to the core tenets of Web3 philosophy. Currently, the product and platform are entirely free. I've never met a team in my life that ships this fucking fast. It's like.
Nice.
It's like we're having trouble keeping up with the documentation because we have to update everything so much.
They're writing faster than you can keep up and put it on the site.
Yeah, it's like, and then we have all this stuff we have to market. We're at a point now where we're finally being able to package everything into these cohesive kind of buckets of product and use cases and solutions, if you will, which is wild to me that we're almost 8 months in, but we've already have these very, very set kind of buckets that we know have engagement from these distinct user groups. It's incredible, man. Like, not to mention, like, the complexity of the stuff they're shipping. This is beyond
super high level.
It's
I've been keeping up.
Beyond me.
I see this stuff coming out, and I'm like, wait, what's going on over there?
Yeah, it's a good team to be a part of, and I think just in the space, there's a lot of similar teams that both keep us motivated and keep us like top of our game, but also that makes it a lot of fun to work with. Typically in like a Web 2 ecosystem, you'd be like, oh, we're competitors, or like we're competitive. But for whatever reason, in Web 3, you tend to be a little bit more open to having conversations around collaboration, even if it's just creating a guide together because we solved this particular use case for this customer. It's like
I think it's sort of like a work, like so much work to be done. It's like almost like in the gold rush. You're not mad if somebody else hits it big because you're like, there's so much around here. There's so much that
and it's going to spill over, and I'll probably get some as well in my greater pursuit.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really awesome. You mentioned competition before, and so I'd love to get back to that. But I wanted to ask you about when you were brought on. Did they have a really specific idea of what they needed you for, what they wanted out of a head of growth, or did they come in and say like, hey, take a look at our business and help us out? Because it sounds like they have an engineering team that's like blazing fast. They have that sort of like business mind to sort of expand the scope of the company from what it was before, from like loot boxes to this great platform.
Yeah,
did
like
they sort of have like a
platform?
Yeah. Did they have like a 30-60-90 for you, or did they sort of say come in and help us out in general?
Yeah, I mean, it was test the channels. Test the channels that we're going to see growth from, and then scale them. And I think we've now identified probably 8 to 10 channels that are driving sustainable growth, and now we're in the process of scaling the team. I think we're now at 5 or 6 just on the growth team. Cool. But it wasn't necessarily like the 30-60-90. It was like these are the high level goals. Find a partnership between yourself and Caddy, who heads up brand and creative, that's going to work well, and then start to attack those buckets systematically and efficiently.
Got it.
And don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of like L's, you know, in terms of testing, and like you try this thing, it does
you
not
got
work.
to. If you're not having if you're not having L's, you're not testing enough. You're like,
Truly. If you're not
if you're not failing a little bit.
you're not iterating enough and kind of, you know, going from there. And so the back half of this year, you'll see a lot come out of the Thirdweb court. I'm, you know, I think you've probably seen, first and foremost, the product itself has shifted now to be like pre-built, you know, offering for creators, builders, maybe more of a no-code, less, you know, low-code kind of offering. Then you have your core like SDKs, what I think we're going to end up calling our Web3 SDK, which will wrap like everything from TypeScript, JavaScript down to iOS, Android. That will have like probably a gaming SDK that's, you know, could theoretically be under the same bucket, but it's really going to be the Unity, the Unreal like SDK, and then the plugins that should enable a little bit more flexibility there. And then this newer kind of bucket, which is more of like our Solidity SDK, and more of like the components within a Web3, you know, or a smart contract developer that's going to find them really helpful. So essentially, if you're like creating your own custom contract, you want to have like a landing page that you can then market or share with others. It's going to have statistics around usage, transactions, like the chain, obviously the security and like auditing of that contract. And then, you know, enabling a one-click deploy for any other developer that immediately kind of wants to fork or iterate on top of that. There's like, you know, authentication and a whole slew of stuff that's basically just gone live. And it's as you're probably getting it now, but as I alluded to, it's a lot of stuff that we now can package and go to market with. And it's all free.
Yeah, it's all. So I almost feel bad asking now because you guys are leaving them in the dust. But who's the competition? Like who's also in the space and who's working on the similar stuff?
It's funny, dude. I don't think we have a like for like competitor out there. That said, like, you know, we look at, there's probably 60 at this point platforms that are NFT platforms in some way, shape, or form that offer an out-of-the-box smart contract. They'll vary from like at the bottom tier, not even offering, you know, you're essentially deploying a smart contract from their wallet, which is, don't ever do that. Like, please call me or send me an email if you're thinking about doing that or using an OpenSea smart contract.
We don't give financial advice on this, but we do give engineering advice. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Not do that. But and then you know, you have your better like top tier solutions like ourselves and Manifold. I'm trying to think who else is like in that same. You have like Moonwalk, which is like they have some interesting offerings around like more social gamification. You know, the funniest part is like we cover all of that, and we cover like anything you want to do with the DAO, governance, voting, whatever. You can create your own token, like you know, bring that into Uniswap or whatever DEX you want to use. Or like more importantly is like what Morales, who I consider our main competitor. And they're an excellent company, awesome team based out of Sweden, building some incredible stuff. But they're like more downstream, you know, creating that, as we talk about this term, composability, utility, all these Web3 buzzwords. That's really like what Thirdweb is this ecosystem of tools, whether you're a creator all the way to like your core smart contract developer, that's enabling you to find a streamlined solution to get you from A to B, whether that's like, you know, simply using the pre-built kind of architecture that we already have that's already audited, or you want to do something that's very, very custom, you know, for that particular use case. And I think that's that as we go back to what is the next step of like Web3, NFT innovation, blockchain innovation, it's realizing that there is this kind of wide world of potential at your fingertips. You just need to find it.
Yeah, no, that's great, Pat.
Awesome.
I hear you, and I hear just how into all this you are, and so I want to now dive into you a little bit, Pat. So it's clear we know what you do now, we know what your interest has been for the last few years, but I like to ask people how all this has affected your life. You know, your friends, your family, your everyday, what it's done for you. You know, what this means for you in the long run, and how you feel about it every day. You know,
Damn.
you know how is it?
That's a hell of a question. You guys are just strong content. Let's see. For me personally, it has been the best thing that's happened to me. Like, you know, it kind of has reminded me that there are brilliant people out there that have humanity's best interest at stake. I think that's probably the simplest way to put it. Is like Web 2 took away a lot of our power and gave it all into the hands of very few people, a couple of, you know, boards, whatever you want to break that into. It was the ownership, the power, the creation, the content of many in the hands of a few who are reaping all those rewards and kind of pulling all those strings. And anytime you're telling me that there's an opportunity to bust that wide open and reframe that entire power hierarchy, all for it. It's weird because I grew up in like white suburban Connecticut, wanting really for nothing. And then, you know, went off to college, like got a great education, worked in finance for the first couple years, and basically was like, this isn't me at my core. Like, I'm not here to just like, you know, in a Web 2 sense, in a TradFi sense, like shill people on mortgages and, you know, like
On
it's,
mortgages.
you get to a point where you're like, I don't really know if I dislike my coworkers or my customers more. You know, because it's just like you're dealing with finance bros and finance bros. And like all people care about is the money. They don't care about the human at the end of the interaction. And so I think that's where I realize there's this disconnect, and that disconnect extensifies to so many other industries in the U.S. Look at insurance, like look at you know, even technology to a certain extent. And some of the platforms that we hold near and dear, like Uber was supposed to be a better option for consumers and for drivers as well, right?
Yeah.
Decimated the New York City taxi industry. Cost $75 to get from Williamsburg to the Lower East Side. Like, who
got helped? Yeah.
Yeah, like it's definitely not in the better sense of consumers. Look at the same thing with all of like the mass media kind of acquisitions that have happened over the last like 10 years. None of that is in the best interest of consumers, but like the Treasury Department and like Judiciary, SEC, all letting these go through. You could say the same thing about cell phone companies. Like it's all the same. So in Web3, the independence of the user is everything, in my opinion. And like the data they own, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but like
No, go crazy.
it is so much greater than that, right? It's like we go back to all of like, you know, the racial tension, like Black Lives Matter, down to what's happening in the Supreme Court now. All of that to me is like symbolized in Web3. It's like the independence, recognition of individuals, whatever you choose as like your discipline or like your heritage, whatever it might be. Web3 is like the promise that we still have a voice and a right and, you know, kind of ownership in that future.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah. I hear you, man.
That's amazing.
Just so everybody knows, because I know this by firsthand, Uber drivers make money, bro.
Yeah.
Uber drivers make money.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me tell
That's
you,
good to know.
okay? I RIP the taxi industry. I'm sorry
like-
for anybody who needs that drunk Uber home, but let me tell you from firsthand experience, bro. Bro,
You really rack it up.
I was working part-time calculating the shit. I was making the same amount of money working my office job in Manhattan. I was like,
Damn.
You're like, am I good? But it's not. But I think to his point is that it's not sustainable. You know.
I know.
Like,
I know.
What
no,
happened
I know.
to these? What happened to these industries? What happened to the things that like?
And that's one of the things that's like that's tough. But sorry, I'm going on a tangent. I just heard you and I'm just like, oh, you're so right. But
that was so funny. I thought you were gonna say something different because like
No,
Pat said like one of the
no.
most beautiful like
I'm
soliloquies
sorry,
I've ever heard, and then Alessandro was like, "Nah, but I be making bread though. I don't know what you're talking about."
like, because he said that, and I'm just remembering. I'm sorry, Pat. It's just like. At its core,
It's
it's like,
true.
damn, it's so
And honestly,
true. It fucks
Alessandro,
things up, but it
if
fucks
that's
things up.
the
But there's
case-
people who benefit from it so
Yeah.
much. Like,
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
met
yeah.
people who like who are Uber drivers as well, like full time, and that they support their families. They're able to go on vacation now. Like,
Yeah,
they're
so
like, I should have
whoever
done
from
this
Uber
fucking years
is
ago.
listening to this, the next step is
Yeah.
call me at Thirdweb, because we're gonna start issuing tokens based on it would be dynamic NFTs for drivers based on their history and like, they've hit like certain amount of miles, they've had this much
Yeah.
conversation. Actually, that's really interesting. You can have like a conversationalist as we talk about tokens, like the idea of a token, modifying over time based on certain attributes is really, really interesting.
So, my question for you, Pat, was more on what you would tell somebody who's just starting off, who can't spend a whole entire weekend on learning, but also doesn't want to be a DJ, right? Wants to be responsible, and not maybe not even like the whole trading crypto coins or buying NFT collections, but I'm sure in your life you have friends, family who go, hey, what you're doing is really cool, right? Like I see you going to these events. I see what you're all about. It all looks really cool. How would you talk to that person? What's the first thing you would say to them if to keep them interacting with you, to keep them engaged? Because yeah, like you could send me or Nick on this reading list and we'll fucking eat that shit up. But
I tend to start with what I know, right? Which is, to me, that's music, and like that's how Nick and I kind of kicked it off originally. But
nice.
when you look at streaming royalties, right? So like, let's just take this X number. This is 100% of the revenue that was generated by the plays of this track. Spotify as the platform takes somewhere, I forget what the number is, 20 to 30% off the top.
Yeah.
That very well may have changed. You have 80, let's just take 80% left. Of that principal, 80% goes to the label, 70 to 80%. A vast majority of that goes to the label, minus what already went to Spotify. You're left with 20 to 30% that goes to the artists, the producers, marketing, like any royalties that they had to pay out for the samples or anything that they use within that track. I start there, and I'm just like, this is what the artist is getting, who created all of this.
I heard some wild statistic the other day that, and I'm not sure if this is true, so don't quote me on it, but I heard that the revenue paid to artists through Web3, NFTs, and sort of direct channels is bigger than the amount paid to creators on Facebook. I think like there's like 3.2 billion or something like paid to artists directly through new technology, through Web3, and I think it's like a half of what Spotify pays out. And so, like, to your point, like these new systems, even with super low penetration, are already like being way more beneficial for the artists, I think, overall.
Yeah, so my homie Sam, who I went to Fordham with, we've been close for years, is the founder of NFT Now, one of the co-founders rather. Him, Matt and Alejandro. And he dropped a track back in March or February of this year. Shit, he's going to kill me that I forgot the platform. It might have been Sound XYZ. Regardless, and then it auctioned on OpenSea. He did 10 one-of-ones. They sold out. It would have been the equivalent of 1 million streams on Spotify. He had 10 people, right? And this is the power of Web3s. And what you realize is that 20% of your audience is going to be, what is the rule? The law.
I think it's like 20-80, like 20% of your audience is 80% of your
botch.
revenue. Yeah. We're just saying all sorts of numbers.
The principle.
Yeah.
It's all good. 70% of 5%. It's already raining.
It's already raining.
Point being, right, is like there's a small percentage of an audience that you've created, a community that you've enriched over time, is going to be your super fans that you're going to be able to monetize or engage because they believe in whatever it is that you've created a community around. And for individuals, that's important. And like creators, I was reading something earlier today around like, it originally started with like People magazine, right?
I saw this. I think I saw this.
Right?
Yeah,
and it's like the death of Kardashians. And it's like starts with People magazine, but then it's like, okay, actually let's see like influencers. No, let's actually see our own friends on social and like what they do. And then we made that into curated like professionals creating content, which influencers. And then that effectively became like now this kind of flywheel of people trying to be famous, creating entertaining content on TikTok, Reels, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, and eventually it'll go back to, you know, I think the next step is going to be us curating content for ourselves again before AI takes over and starts actually just creating whatever it is our subconscious wants.
Yeah.
And again, like I've, you know, kind of mitigated whatever the ultimate, you know, value prop that meme or whatever it was trying to point out. But point being is like, we ultimately are creating content, you know, and that content should be thoughtful and resonate with something internally for us and our end audience.
Now, would you be mad if your AI copy was a nerd? Like, I would be so mad.
Nah, bro, dude. I am a nerd. I'm like,
no, me too. So my copy should try something new, bro. Like, we already been through this.
That's the thing, though. When your AI gets you like too accurate, you're like, no, I'm not into this. It's like, no, I know you. You're into this. I'm showing you what you want.
I forgot the project name. But some fucking project promised that they would have an AI essentially like learn you throughout your whole life to have your AI self ingrained in the blockchain for your family for like ever. To go back and like interact with like an AI that has learned you throughout your whole life, or whatever. And I'm like, yo, what if you're kind of annoying, bro? Like,
I mean, think about it. Everybody finds their own voice annoying, right? I also think to some extent I would find like the level at which I talk, the level at, you know,
like, AI and me, I'd be like, shut him off.
Yeah, like, mute that immediately.
Oh, my girlfriend listens to this sometimes. But you ever like hear your partner say something like you, and you're like, yo, I sound like that sometimes.
They steal your words.
They steal you because I catch myself saying things that my girlfriend says all the time. I'm like, damn, I'm really talking like her. And
No, but I think to the point of before about the specific content, and your point before about like finding freedom in Web3, when you have a situation where you can find full financial support from 10 super fans as opposed to a million, you know, people who kind of you know fuck with you but not really, you can also make the content so much better for those 10 people that love you just for you, right?
It's
Everyone
freeing.
in the future, everybody in the future isn't going to be trying to focus on doing some cool new dance or trying to be somewhere they're not. Everyone's just going to be themselves to the highest level.
People got caught on that. They would try to sell. So like they'd have the bot followers on Instagram, like 100,000, 200,000 like followers or whatever. They'd try to sell T-shirts. Like the easiest fucking thing in the world anybody's ever done is try to sell a T-shirt as like a brand or something, right?
Yeah.
And they couldn't get 2% of their following to buy a T-shirt.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Like, and they would have to like recall it because like maybe like 0.5% of everybody tried, and I'm like, they got called out, right? And you're right. It's this like, I know that's like an artificial anecdotal thing, but it was, to me, when I hear you, I hear like this does need to change, right? It needs to go back to people just making shit because they want to, buying things because they like it, you know. I remember I uploaded a video on YouTube when I was in like fucking high school just because it was YouTube. Like people put up stupid funny videos on YouTube. Now it's a business. Now people make their whole living.
Well, it's almost like you think about it. Mr. Beast has made the virality of YouTube so commonly known that it's like now everybody kind of has the tools or the framework to go after it, which then means it's no longer, you know, a scarce tactic. Like everyone's using it.
YouTube has their algorithm. Twitter has in their everyone says the algorithm, right?
Oh, Twitter's got multiple algorithms, right?
is that Elon said, speaking of Twitter, we're going to make the algorithm open source. And people talk about that. Why isn't the algorithm open source? The algorithm should be open source.
They absolutely should.
Oh, I have a hot take.
We have a little bit of time left, but I do want to touch on this. And I feel like we all have something big to say.
Hot take, though.
Get your hot take out, Nick. What's your hot take?
My hot take is TikTok has a better search engine than Google. And if it isn't currently, it will be within the next year.
Dude, I just heard a stat to that point that 60 to 70% of Gen Z uses Instagram or TikTok search first when
Yeah.
referencing
What?
creators,
It's-
brands, restaurants,
Yeah.
places to eat. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
You think
Yeah, yeah.
that'll
What?
replace?
It's
So I
crazy,
on
yeah.
that, our generation, when you search something, you say, "Let me Google that," right?
Right.
Yeah.
Is that ever gonna? I mean, that has to change.
Let me
Will it?
talk that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
let me talk that real quick.
say?
What you talking about? What you talking about?
Let me look that up on TikTok. Let me like you know what I'm talking about, or
But
like
so, like, are they gauging?
no one ever said, "Yo, let me wiki it." No one, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like
What I'm
Were you
trying to
saying
figure out is like, what are they gauging the quality of the restaurant by their reels or by their TikTok videos? Like,
I don't know what they're doing.
or are they
but
looking at
I've-
comments about the place? What?
It's never failed me. I'll look up the most random sort of vague version of like some sort of like prompt. First or second video, easy. And like you can go on like Yelp or something for date ideas or stuff like that. But I have a full folder of just like favorites on TikTok of just like spots and just like people like roller skating. I'm like, yo, where is this? Like nice little date spot. And it's like it's so much better of an experience than Google with just straight links. Not saying that's not the way we search. That's not the way we communicate. We communicate and we share ideas and we have a different sort of feel for the way we
my
sort of like want to get.
unsubstantiated theory is
Go.
that because it comes from China and they could give a fuck about your privacy, that it really does. Okay, honestly, I don't give a fuck about my privacy.
I was like, where's he gonna go?
Like,
Where's he gonna go? With
I
this? Like,
no,
I'm
I
gonna get
I don't
canceled.
know if this is a hot take. I don't know or whatever, but
Yeah.
I don't care about my privacy. You know, people
That's
are like,
hilarious.
"Oh,
That's
shit,
wild. True.
like you gotta." No, I'm talking about like my personal bank, all that
no,
stuff.
you
like,
care about privacy. You just don't care about your privacy.
No, I don't care. Like when people talk about like your financial privacy, 100%. Like no one should be able to get your bank account. No. I'm talking about like people are very hung up, rightfully so. It's your own privacy about like Facebook's practices, different like social media algorithms.
Do you want to know why
TikTok.
everybody
I
cares
could-
about that shit now?
Yeah.
Because
Why?
Apple spent money to market that shit, saying
Yeah.
privacy is important.
So they could they sunk everybody else. They sunk everybody else, and now Apple's gonna drop that ad product.
Oh, they already have. They already have, my friend.
I'm
I'm already seeing them.
and I feel like I know I'm
This
not
makes-
alone on this, but I'm not the majority on this. I could
so
give
dirty.
2 fucks about my privacy. If people
Yeah.
want to come in and look up, hear me while I'm talking about shit, and show me an Amazon. If you want to make my life easier, bro.
I think I
I'm
should
all
get paid
for
for
it.
it. I think that's my big Web3.
That's
hot
Web
take.
Web3.
I don't think
Yeah,
they should
I wanna get
monetize
paid.
my data.
You should
or
pay me
off it.
an impression. If I'm an impression, and why give it to a
Yes.
platform? Give
Yes.
me the impression. I'll tell you if the ad is good. If I want the product and like what other stuff me and my friends are interested in. That's gonna be. I think there's gonna be in the future. Yeah.
Yo, let's chat after this.
A decentralized ad
Because I had this
platform,
idea.
guys.
Dude, I had this idea at the end in November before I even joined Thirdweb. I think it's
Yeah.
possible to build this on Thirdweb, to be honest.
Yeah.
Is like the DSP for like, it's brilliant. The other
Yeah,
thing I was
it's
just
amazing.
gonna mention is like, as you're talking about privacy, Alessandro, it's like I don't really give a shit about my internet privacy either until we're fully in Web3, which then it's like my browsing history, as we kind of just referenced, is like that I own that. And I should be able to monetize that shit.
Yeah.
But in a Web 2 sense, we're now getting to a point where everything's subscription based. We're paying, microtransactions. Like, I'm glad BMW's dying a slow death for this, but their microtransaction subscription for fucking seated heats.
They're having you
Heated
pay.
seats, excuse me.
My
They're having you pay per cheek. They're having you pay per cheek.
I read
You see-
the actual like financial reasoning for that, and I was like, "Oh, this makes sense." But who
Yeah.
the fuck in marketing
But
said,
at the
"Yeah,
end of
this
the
will
day,
go
right?
down well"?
We're consumers, and like, sure, on paper it seems great idea, especially like as we look at the bottom line and like over time financials. But dude, we're fucking human beings. Like, do not nickel and dime me for a heat seater that's already built into the car.
I'm paying like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for your car. My
Yeah,
cheeks
it's not
better
more.
be warm for
24/7,
$60,000 fucking dollars, bro. Like what the? The little
Yo,
Toyota-
that Adobe ass vehicle. Like, what is it? What do they do?
Dude, well said. Well said. But like,
Yeah.
we used to have, we used to share our data and like far and wide. And now that there's all of these privacy restrictions, and now that Apple has rolled out ATT and iOS 14.5 and iOS 15, and like, just layering on top of it so that they can roll out their own ad offering. it's kind of, once again, goes back to the screwing over the consumer for, the big orgs like Ultimate Means.
Yeah.
And again, Web3, like, once you and I build this, Knyck, whatever
Yeah.
this new,
Yeah, that's
like,
gonna be awesome.
it'll be like the user advertising bureau or something
Yeah.
along those
Before
lines.
we move on to WTFs, I want to leave everybody with just one last thing to think about.
Yeah.
What is the value of a stream? What is the
Yeah.
value of a click?
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to Knyck about this development thing. I was like, hey, what is the value of one less click for your workflow? How much will you value having to click one or two less times, right? What do you value? What is the value of your stream, your musical stream? Like, is the value of Taylor Swift's stream, one musical stream, the same as an up and coming artist? There's these questions that we don't really have an answer to, right?
Bro,
And
then you get into the, sorry, go ahead.
and what's it called? And people people in Web3 and people in this new era, I believe, are trying to figure it out with the artist's best intentions in mind. And that's what I love about all of this, right? We're discussing this because right now Spotify knows what the value of that stream is, but it's not public information. You know what I'm talking about? Like Google ad and Facebook ad, they know what the value of you clicking on an ad is, but I mean, is that public information? I don't know. I don't know about that one, but I want people to think about those things, right? And to your point, Knyck, I don't give a fuck about my privacy, but I do give a fuck about somebody making money off my name. I better get my cut, right? So, with that,
Wait, Pat, what were you gonna say?
Pat,
in the
I
middle
want you to
of-
get your last thought in
Yeah.
before we go on to our last thing.
No, dude, that was brilliant. I was just gonna say, like, to your point, up and coming artists versus like a Taylor Swift track you've heard 100 times. That brand new stream of that up and coming artist, I would arguably value higher.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Right.
I love that you're like thinking through this, because I actually hadn't even given this too much
Right.
thought. And like,
Yeah,
now that our lives are spent on the internet, we have to.
I used to live in music podcasts and music industry podcasts forever. It's just one of those things that interests me, and one of the questions that just reoccurringly, almost to the point where it was a joke in this podcast, was, well, what is the value of a stream? You know, they would just jokingly ask that when they wanted to like cut the ice, or there was like a really, right. But really though, like when you're thinking about innovation, when you're thinking about what's next in these industries, and you get down to the core, what is the value of a stream? And with clicks, I was asking Knyck, hey Knyck, if I told you that it took you 5 clicks to look at this and I can make it 1 click, how valuable is that for you? You know, how
It's
much
like-
do you value that
To
action?
me, you spend so much time, Knyck, I'm gonna let you
No, go.
finish.
Yeah,
But
I'll let you finish.
spend so much time discovering, and like as a DJ as well, like you spend so much time just looking for new music. If you can reduce that discovery by 5 clicks to get me from the point of searching for something new, right? So it's a pretty abstract goal, to getting me to the point of value of like that moment of discovery, the serendipity of hearing that first beat, vocal, whatever the synth line might be in a new track. And like, dude, that is a moment that I value almost higher than anything.
Yeah. It's that moment when you hear that drop in the club
Moment of
and
discovery,
you,
whatever it might be.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, I mean, not to get too caught up, but like Joe, you were talking about the difference between a stream, between a big artist and a little artist, but it's also sort of like a stream, you know, like when it's played as well. Like for example, I immediately started thinking like, what would I rather have? There's songs that mean the world to me, like songs that I've already identified as like, oh, I want that to be my wedding song. What would I rather have? Could I play that for the rest of my life, or would I rather have it for that day, for that moment when I step out on the dance floor? And what's the difference in pricing there? You know, like do those things deserve like cost? Like I don't know.
There's so many questions in this
Yeah.
new fucking world that we have, and I really hope that people are asking themselves these questions that don't have a right or wrong answer right now, but it is really interesting to talk about. And so with that, Knyck, let's go to our favorite last segment, and that is our WTF moment, our who to follow. Who the fuck do we follow? And Pat, you said you listened to the podcast before. I don't know if you got this far into one of the podcasts, but we love to suggest to the audience somebody to follow, somebody who that you think is a good follow, whether it's because they're entertaining or they're educational or it's a project that you really like or you want to plug something that you're doing.
Yeah.
Who do we follow?
All right, cool. So I'll go first if you need a second to think of something, and then you want to just go, and then Pat will finish with you. So mine is DWR Dan Romero. He's working on Farcaster. It's sort of a decentralized, sufficiently decentralized social media platform. So really cool stuff over there. I just applied for the wait list, and so they have their whole test flight going on right now. Really interesting stuff. Jero, do you have a WTF? Do you want to go?
Yeah,
Pat, go first.
so my WTF, I might have said this one before, and I am going to double down even if I did and say it again. My WTF is the Nifty Portal, at the Nifty Portal. In
Uh-huh.
this bear market where so many people have left the space, the Nifty Portal is a morning NFT show from Monday to Friday that goes at 9 a.m. that still regularly holds over 1,000 concurrent listeners on a Twitter space
Wow.
every morning
The
at
build.
9 a.m. and they just keep on going through all the chaos, all the slowdowns, all the pumps and all the dumps. They're still fucking there creating, and their viewership stays. And if anybody is interested in seeing what a team has to do to just keep fucking building and keep their audience engaged through a bear market, this is a case study on that. And that team that they got over there, Po, Knyck, Kicks and Easy, they are great. So that's at Nifty Portal. I've mentioned them before, but
Mhm.
damn, I thought maybe they'd go away, and they just doubled down. They're still there, and they really lead that morning talk shows
Yo,
NFT degen space, if you
yo,
will.
DGen's gonna DGen, yeah.
Yeah. So,
100%.
Pat, what do you got for us?
Dude, I mean, I plug Thirdweb, but Furkan Ryden at Furkan R FURQAN R on Twitter. Dude, he's one of the smartest people, probably the smartest person I've ever met. One of the most
Cool.
successful entrepreneurs I know, and obviously, one of the co-founders of Thirdweb. Just always building cool shit. Yeah.
Awesome.
10 out of 10.
Thank you so much. All right, cool. We'll follow Furkan here. And thank you so much for hopping on the pod. Been a big fan of Thirdweb and the stuff you guys are building over there. Really excited to see what you guys drop moving into the second half of this year. And yeah, we definitely have to keep touching base on music and just everything going on in New York. Really appreciate you hopping on here, man.
Dude, thank you so much for having me, guys. I had a
Thanks,
blast.
Pat, for coming on. Thank you, everybody who tuned in this week. This has been the Kick Blocks Pod, the start of season 2. We out here, Patrick. Thank you for joining, and that's fucking wrap, everybody.
Hey,
Cheers,
we
guys.
out. Catch you guys next week. Peace.